of the inconvenience. Now we don't have elevators functioning at the mobile launcher, and it is a very tall structure. Folks are having to walk up and down it, and it's taking them a little extra time to get through it. But that said, the mobile launcher itself performed well. We just are having to work our way through some of the damage assessments, and it's taking us a little longer.
Thank you both. Our next question will be from Marcia Smith with spacepolicyonline.com.
Thanks so much. I think this question is probably for Jeff. I'm wondering, how many burns are there altogether of the arms and of the auxiliary engines? And separately, perhaps for Jeff or for Mike, where did the core stage come down? And did you get any visual sightings of it?
So I'll talk about the four major burns that we have on Artemis I. Of course, we've been talking about the outbound power flyby as well as the distant retrograde insertion. After we do a half a loop in the distant retrograde orbit, we'll then do a distant retrograde departure, and then we'll do a return powered flyby. And so those are really the four major burns that we use the OMS engine for to get Orion into orbit around the moon and then to bring it home after we complete the half rev there. But we do have some smaller correction burns. I think there's 12 or so of those that we do, but they're much smaller. We use the attitude maneuvering jets. So you can really think of it as four major burns for the entirety of Artemis I on Orion.
And Marcia, again, thank you for your question. In terms of the core stage disposal, if you recall, we inserted the insertion altitude was a 975 by 16 nautical mile insertion altitude. We do have to loft the orbit with the Block 1 of the Space Launch System, which we will have an upgrade with what we'll call Block 1B with the enhanced upper stage starting with Artemis 4, where we don't have to loft. But because we have to loft with the interim cryo propulsion stage in order to have enough performance to make our way to the moon, we lowered the perigee to 16 nautical miles, which is going to get Earth capture, and the core stage certainly did that. It came down in the Pacific to the east of Hawaii and to the west of the West Coast, so well away from any human presence, and it safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean.
Our next question comes from Jeff Faust with Space News.
Hi, question for Mike Sarafin. I'm just curious if after a couple of days you've got any more information on the performance of the SLS, how it compared to what you expected with both the core stage, the boosters, and the ICPS. And then also on the CubeSats beyond Luna HMAP, which CubeSats have you been informed are working properly so far? Thanks.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for the questions. SLS performance, I have not received an update since we had our quick look on day of launch. You're a day too early for that question. We are going to get a performance outbrief tomorrow on the Space Launch System, the core stage, the boosters, and the interim cryo propulsion stage. But again, all indications were the system performed spot on. And as I said in the post-launch press conference, we came very, very close to the predicted insertion altitude, and then translunar injection was exactly where we had intended. But we should have more information as part of a post-launch assessment and a performance review that we're going to do tomorrow afternoon. In terms of the CubeSats, you wanted to know which others were successful. Argo Moon, which is a partnership with the Italian Space Agency, BioSentinel, which is basically an analog that's flying some yeast to measure radiation. Equilus, which is a partnership with the Japanese Exploration Agency, Luna HMAP, and then I believe Omotenashi, which is another Japanese Exploration Agency CubeSat, are on a path to success. The remainder, as we've had reported from our payload partners, either have encountered
technical issues post-deploy, or have had intermittent communications, or in one case did not acquire signal with their communication asset that they had planned. So, we're working with our payload partners to the extent we can, but and we're being as transparent as we can here. But if you want to understand more thoroughly what each of the payload customers are seeing, I would reach out to those individually.
Our next question is from Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Disbanded, but was there any operational changes or any impact to the mission from that? And when was that team called together?
Hey, Irene, we missed the first part of your question. Can you repeat it for us, please?
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we got you.
Thanks. Yes, it's for Mike Sarafin. The issue with the star tracker, when did that occur? And although the anomaly team has completed its work, were there any operational changes or any impact to the mission itself? And I have a follow-up.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question, Irene. That's a good one. The anomaly resolution team, as it pertains to the star trackers, we got together as a team the afternoon of the 16th, which was it was a 5 p.m. call, so some 12-ish hours after launch, and we knew that there was just some anomalous performance in the star trackers, and it took the team some time to work through it. And the Orion program, and one gentleman in particular, Ryan Proud, that led that anomaly resolution team, did a fantastic job of researching all the potential causes. And what we determined, it was not the hardware. The hardware was operating exactly as it was designed to. It was actually an environmental situation where the thrusters were being picked up by the star tracker because it was actually thrusting over the field of view of the star tracker by design, and the light was hitting the plume, and it was picking it up, and it was having a hard time understanding, was that a star or an object out there that I should track, or maybe there were objects in the field of view when it thought there shouldn't be, because the star trackers are programmed to know where the stars are, and it was essentially confusing the star tracker, and we continued on both star trackers 1 and 2 to get what they call a component not ready flag. So it took us a little bit of time to work through that one. The star trackers were gathering data throughout, and it was just one of these episodic things that took some time to resolve. The team correlated it to thruster firings, and it just took a little bit of time to do that. In terms of operational changes, there are no operational changes. We are proceeding, and that was one of the outbrief recommendations today from that anomaly resolution team as we sunset that team, was to consider the star trackers operating normally, and to proceed based on that information. And Jim, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. It was under the Orion program.
Yeah. This is one of those examples of being able to learn from flight testing. You can never simulate the combined environment of plumes and Earth shadow or Earth sunlight and refraction of light into star trackers perfectly on the ground. But we fly and we find these things. As Mike described, the team pounded flat every possible explanation. We think we understand exactly what's happening. The star tracker itself is performing perfectly. We've ingested over 380,000 measurements into the navigation filter. Every one's been accepted without rejection. So we're very confident in moving forward, and we'll proceed with the decision to proceed with the OPF tomorrow.
Thank you.
The question was about the ITAR issue at 39B. What was the situation or the configuration that prevented, I guess, the photographers from going out and picking up remote cameras till today. I guess they were told that there was some ITAR considerations. And then also, I just wanted to make a comment in light of the anomaly resolution team, and it sounds like it was an interesting episode, but that information hasn't been included in any of the updates that were posted so far. And you all talk so much about how important this mission is and that it's the first human spacecraft in 50 years, and your number 4 of your objectives is public outreach. I would just request that whatever you can do to provide more detailed and more timely status reports of the mission, even if things are not all knit together and here's the outcome. It's really important to us to kind of be able to follow along as these things are happening. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Irene, and I certainly understand your feedback on the Star Tracker, what I'll call glitch or anomaly. That one was not a high-level concern. It just was one of those what I'll call confusing discrepancies that took us a little bit of time to work through. But I certainly understand the feedback there. And in terms of the ITAR issue, I am not fully up to speed on the issue at pad 39B, but what has been shared with me is that the mobile launcher has flight interfaces on it that are considered export controlled, and not all of those are in a configuration that are ready to be photographed and shared. And there's some amount of work that needs to be done to get those in a configuration. And prior images that have been shared were either shared at a low enough resolution where that was not an issue, or were shared such that the umbilical interfaces were not in a full view, such that they were export or ITAR controlled. So that's my understanding of it. I am not an ITAR expert, but that's what I know on that particular topic, and I understand why you're asking, and I would just ask for your patience as we work through that one.
Thanks, Mike. Our next question comes from James Hillhouse with americaspace.com.
Thank you, guys, for holding this briefing. I have a couple of questions. I guess the first one is, what is Orion's velocity going to be at the equigravisphere, I guess where the Earth and the Moon's gravity are equal? And the other question has to do with the smaller correction burns you mentioned. Are those being done by the auxiliary engines on the ESM or the ESM's reaction control thrusters? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that question. First of all, we don't have the exact velocity at the sphere of influence. We know it's approximately 35,000 miles from the Moon, where Orion will then become under the primary influence of the Moon's gravity, but we don't have that exact figure available to us at this point. I can tell you again that the outbound powered flyby burn, Orion will be traveling at 1.5 kilometers per second relative to the Earth. With respect to the correction burns, we performed 2 of those to date. The first, which we call OTC-1, or Outbound Trajectory Correction 1. This one was done as a checkout of the OMS engine. The big 6,000-pound engine was executed perfectly. The second burn, OTC-2, was small enough that it could be performed by the small reaction control system engines, but we also have auxiliary thrusters on board. And the software makes that determination based on the size of the burn that has to be done. It picks the most efficient engine to use for that. We have 2 more of those coming up, OTC-3 and OTC-4, before we arrive at the Moon.
Great. Our next question comes from Bill Harwood with CBS.
Yeah, hi, guys. And first of all, just off the top, I'd just like to say I completely agree with Irene Klotz's observations. You know, the Star Trackers, I thought the flight rule required 2 operational trackers for a full duration mission. And so, I mean, I totally understand it's been resolved. I just would have thought that was potentially more significant issue, but obviously not. Anyway, Mike, you said hazards at the pad. What does that mean? I mean, I'm not looking for a detailed assessment, but does that mean like debris somebody could trip over, a commodities issue, power lines down? I mean, any little details you can share? And for Jeff, you said 70 nautical miles at close approach. I saw something else that it was 70 statute. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right conversion. Thanks.
Do you want to take the mileage thing? I'll take the rest of it.
Sure. So the best information I have is 70 nautical miles. And I think that's really what we do our trajectory planning in. So that's the number I would use. Of course, I'll happy to be double checking with my flight design folks, who I'm sure will call me after this press briefing if I didn't get it right. And but 70 nautical miles is the distance that we're planning to, that I have in front of me. I do want to address the star trackers real quick, in that we never had a case where we violated the flight rules. The star trackers were functioning sufficient that we could continue on with the mission. It was really a case where we were seeing something we didn't understand. And so you are correct that we do need the star trackers to continue on with the mission, but at all times they were providing us measurements that were able to allow the mission to proceed. And so while we saw something we didn't quite understand, the hardware was operating sufficiently that we were able to continue the mission. And of course, we talk in what if it doesn't work, but in this case, it continued to work sufficiently well enough for us to continue on while the team really investigated what was going on at the time.
Yeah, Jeff, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We were meeting the functionality requirements for attitude updates and navigation updates with the star trackers. So from a system performance and system functionality standpoint, that one was not violating the flight rule. It was, again, something that we didn't fully understand, and we needed to get a brain trust together to work through it, and it didn't take that long. That said, I understand again the feedback, Bill, and apologize that we didn't share that sooner. This is a bit of a marathon in terms of launching from the Kennedy Space Center,
getting safely through translunar injection. We provided an update
to each and every one of you after launch, and that was after a very long day. And then I'm speaking for myself. I think I went and took a nap at the hotel for about 3 hours, and then was notified that we had a funny with the star tracker. We did note that, and then I believe we've noted that, and then we had the anomaly resolution discussion the afternoon of the 15th. Again, I'm speaking for myself. I took a power nap, and then got on a plane here to Houston the next day, and then we settled in and we worked our way down the funny list, and that was on the funny list, and we had over a dozen funnies on the list. So we are proceeding, given the information that we have, and that was not seen as a hard constraint. It was just something that we just didn't understand. It was initially outside of our experience base, but again, understand the feedback on that one. In terms of hazards at the pad, there were some gas line leaks that are used to inert the system, both on the nitrogen and the helium side. Those in of themselves are hazards, right? There's asphyxiation, and we need to worry about those types of things. But simply having some amount of damage and the inconvenience of not being able to fully assess the mobile launcher, given the elevator blast door issue, is something that's just causing us to take a little more time. So the team is proceeding out of an abundance of caution to get the full system status for the mobile launcher, and they're working their way through that. I would just again ask for a little bit of patience as we work through it. It's been 2 days since we launched, and it's just taken a little bit of time.
We have time for just a couple more questions this evening. Our next will come from Sophie Sanchez with Cosmic Chicago.
Hi, thank you. This question is for Mike. Sorry to, go on about the star trackers again, but you mentioned that the issue being with the thruster firing, I understand that the software is working, but do you expect the dazzling to be a recurring issue as you continue to use the thrusters? I mean, just going forward in future missions, they're going to rely on these star trackers. And then if you can tell us where are the two star trackers located on Orion in relation to each other and the thrusters? And just, a follow-up question on that. On media. Is there going to be any more engineering footage from the launch offered? And, we've been expecting more views, not only of the mission, but also from the launch pad. Thank you.
I'll split the Star Tracker question, Sophie, and again, thank you for your question. We do expect this to be a normal phenomenon with the Star Trackers. It was something that we didn't initially understand, and it is a normal feature of this specific configuration of the Orion spacecraft. Jim, do you want to talk about kind of the orientation and just how the system is configured, and then I'll talk about the more media release.
Sure. I'll just add a few more words about how the software works. So the Star Tracker is constantly outputting its attitude knowledge, and the onboard software of Orion is looking for that information. Occasionally, when we see this dazzling phenomenon, the software may get a flag or generate a flag saying, I'm not ready to incorporate that data into my navigation filter. Now, this is a temporary situation. The Star Tracker keeps trying to acquire attitude knowledge, and when it's ready, it then clears that flag, and the software is able to reset and keep going. So this is a phenomenon we will expect to continue periodically throughout the rest of the mission. However, as we've moved away from Earth, we've seen less occurrences of it. But the system and the software is set up to deal with that and continue generating attitude information just fine. As for the location, on the aft end of what we call the crew module adapter is what's called a navigation base. Here we have two star trackers mounted in 90 degrees apart, as well as the optical navigation system, which is a different camera is used to help navigate through deep space. So these cameras, the star trackers and the optical navigation camera, are located at the aft end here. And if you recall the orientation of the service module, there are pods of reaction control thrusters oriented throughout 90 degrees apart. One of these pods is located pretty close to the Star Tracker base, and that's what is causing the dazzling phenomenon. But it's a very tightly packed orientation. We have radiators and Star Trackers and many other equipment on that service module. And so this is just something that teams have seen in past spaceflight, and we're prepared to deal with it with no impact to the mission.
Yeah, and on the orientation, Sophie, I'm sure we can follow up with you after the fact and show you a 3D model or show you, kind of a graphic of where the optical bench and the star trackers and the optical navigation sensors sit on the navigation base relative to the thrusters, just to kind of give you a sense of where they are relative to the overall Orion spacecraft, but also relative to each other, the thrusters and the optical sensors. In terms of more media release, yes, absolutely. We will share footage from the launch, the launch phase, the ascent through translunar injection. As Jeff was indicating earlier, we do have to manage bandwidth for any information that is recorded on board the Orion spacecraft. We do that through the Deep Space Network, and there are many, many other customers, science customers, that use the Deep Space Network, and we need to be good stewards of that resource. There is a capacity that we share there with other customers. But the data that is on the ground, we do need to go through that from a export control and compliance process. That is not something that NASA imposes on itself. That is a federal law that we, because we have dual-use technology, have to comply with, and there is a process to do that. And we have folks that literally have to look through every still image and every video that's released when it comes to dual-use technology that is on the export compliance and the international arms and traffic regulations list. And it is a byproduct of the type of system and the type of mission that we fly. We don't choose that for ourselves. It is just something that we have to comply with. So again, I would just ask for your patience and let us work through that process. And we will absolutely share what we can as soon as it's available. There are many, many images out there. I probably have seen like maybe 1% of them just in what little time that I've had here in Houston. But my personal focus is on working with these gentlemen and the teams that they represent to accomplish the objectives and do so safely. And we have other team members that are focused on sharing with the general public and all of you in the media what we can as soon as we can, and we're committed to do that.
And our last question in the queue this evening comes from Jackie Waddles with CNN.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for doing this. So Mike, you mentioned there were a dozen or so funnies that you were working through the day after launch. Do any of those stick out as significant or remain unresolved? And then going into this decision tomorrow on whether to enter the distant retrograde orbit, what sticks out to you on that checklist, and what could prevent that from being a no answer? Thank you.
Yeah, Jackie, that's a great question. In terms of our readiness to commit to the distant retrograde orbit and the decision gate tomorrow, there is nothing that sticks out as a clear no-go or a lean against what we've seen. Of the 13 funnies that we've seen, we talked about the Star Tracker component ready flag. We had a coolant loop 1 flow rate funny, where we saw a momentary drop in the flow rate, and it's happening episodically, which indicates that there's gas in that fluid line that has a propylene glycol water mixture. We're getting proper cooling on the coolant loop 1 specifically. We've seen a number of issues with file transfers from the solar array wingtip cameras. They have memory and recorders on board. They use a Wi-Fi system to get imagery into the cockpit. Obviously, imagery, we love it. We want to share it as much as we can. We want to record it. But if we're having issues getting it off of the vehicle, that actually slows the effort to share things with the team. And Jeff and his team and the FOD team and Mission Control have worked through that. They've kind of figured out how to work through the system. And part of this is with the Deep Space Network and understanding when we have the availability to do that. We did have a number of communications glitches, some of which are behind us during the launch phase. We had either forward or return link problems, but we did capture a lot of data during the launch phase. And we've seen that the spacecraft is running a little hotter when it flies tail to sun, but it's certainly well within limits. So those and some other micro switches and brake latch indications on the solar array wings, all those, the team has documented, worked through to understand, is this a thermal thing? Is it a micro switch thing? But overall, the system is performing really well. And right now, we don't have any again, hard leans or hard no-goes against the commit point to the outbound powered flyby. But that said, that decision gate is tomorrow. There's always a chance that something could happen between the time that we're talking and tomorrow, and our risk posture and our situation could change. So we're just going to wait. We're going to give it more time. We're going to give the teams more time to assess all the data that we have and to continue to shake down the spacecraft as we head outbound. and wait for that decision gate and make that decision when it's time. It's not time to make that decision right now. And I don't know, Jim, do you have anything to add in terms of the anomalies? Anything stick out in your mind that would be a hard no-go?
No, I think you characterized it very well. We're learning some things about the system that we didn't see in ground testing. But again, the system performance has, in general, exceeded expectations, and everything points to being able to accomplish the outbound powered flyby and continue the mission.
Okay. And Jeff, from your standpoint, you're one of the lead operators in mission control. Anything that you want to highlight in terms of our ability to enter the distant retrograde orbit and proceed with the outbound powered flyby?
No, I would tell you that the vehicle is very clean, right? We're learning things on a first flight vehicle. A lot of that, honestly, is the operators going, hey, this didn't look like the way I expected it, but then we look at it a little bit longer and we say, well, that's performance that's acceptable. It may not be what we expected, but it is acceptable performance and it allows us to proceed. So there's a lot of that learning that's going on. And, right now, all the systems are meeting all of our flight rules to press for OPF. As Mike mentioned, the MMT will make that decision tomorrow, but right now we're looking good and we're ready to go continue executing.
Yeah, so I think what you're hearing here, Jackie and Irene and others that have asked some of these questions, is we had an understanding of the system headed into the mission. We had predicts. We had, whether it was how much power would we consume or how much propellant or how hot the vehicle would be. And we're not exactly matching that. And in most cases, it is performing